Gary Leon Ridgway, later known as the Green River Killer, was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He was convicted of murdering 49 women, though he confessed to killing 71 and claimed the number could be as high as 90. His victims were mostly vulnerable women, primarily sex workers and runaways, who he lured, murdered, and discarded with chilling efficiency. His crimes spanned from 1982 until his arrest in 2001, though the height of his killing spree occurred in the early to mid-1980s. Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah. He had a troubled childhood in a volatile home. His father, who worked as a bus driver, frequently spoke bitterly about sex workers, while his mother was domineering and harsh. Ridgway wet the bed into his early teens, and his mother would bathe him afterward, during which he experienced confused feelings of arousal and shame. These experiences likely laid the psychological foundation for his future hatred of women, especially sex workers. By high school, Ridgway was a poor student and socially awkward. At age 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived. Ridgway later claimed he wanted to know what it felt like to kill. After graduating, he joined the Navy and served in Vietnam, where he frequently visited sex workers. After his return, Ridgway married multiple times and worked for 30 years as a spray painter at a truck factory outside Seattle. His killing spree began in July 1982, when 2 boys discovered the body of 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield floating in Washington's Green River. Over the next few weeks, 4 more bodies were discovered in or near the river: Deborah Bonner, Marcia Chapman, Cynthia Hines, and Opal Mills. All were young women, all were strangled, and most had worked as sex workers. Thus began what would be known as the Green River Murders. Ridgway's method was consistent. He would pick up women from the Pacific Highway South area in King County, typically sex workers or vulnerable young women. He would offer money for sex, take them to a secluded location, often near woods, rivers, or even his own home, and strangle them, usually with his hands or a ligature. Some of the victims were raped before or after death. Many of the bodies were posed, and some were left in clusters, often returning to the scenes to have sex with the corpses. He later admitted to engaging in necrophilia, sometimes days or weeks after the murder. As bodies continued to turn up, police formed the Green River Task Force in 1984, a multi-agency operation involving local law enforcement, the FBI, and forensic experts. The public was gripped by fear. Women in the sex trade community were terrified. Tips poured in, and thousands of interviews were conducted. But evidence was minimal. The killer left few clues. He often cleaned the victims' bodies, removed ligatures, and dumped them in remote, overgrown areas. Several suspects emerged. One was a taxi driver who had reported strange dreams about the murders. Another was a man who had once been convicted of killing a sex worker, but none panned out. Eventually, Gary Ridgway himself became a suspect in 1983 after a sex worker accused him of rough behavior during a date. He passed a polygraph, and hair and saliva samples were taken, but at the time, DNA technology was too primitive to yield results. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Green River case had gone cold. But in 2001, a breakthrough came with advances in DNA technology. The forensic team re-examined evidence from several victims and matched DNA found on 3 of them, Marcia Chapman, Opal Mills, and Carol Christensen, to Ridgway. He was arrested on November 30, 2001, outside the truck factory where he worked. When questioned, Ridgway initially denied involvement, but confronted with DNA evidence, he slowly began to confess. In 2003, he agreed to a plea bargain. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he would confess to all the murders he had committed and help locate the bodies of remaining victims. Over months of interviews, Ridgway detailed how he would often kill multiple women in a week, sometimes 2 in a day. He admitted to killing them out of rage and convenience, eliminating them to avoid being reported, or simply because he saw them as disposable. His confessions were cold, methodical, and terrifyingly emotionless. He recalled victims by physical traits, not names. He described how he dumped their bodies in clusters to throw off police. Sometimes he placed them near other discarded remains to confuse investigators about the number of killers. He also admitted to returning to the dump sites for sex with the decomposing bodies, sometimes covering them with leaves or plastic to preserve them. In total, Ridgway was convicted of 48 murders in 2003. A 49th was added in 2011. He admitted to dozens more, and while not all could be confirmed, he claimed the number exceeded 70. Some victims were never identified, and many were only found years later based on Ridgway's confessions. The courtroom during Ridgway's sentencing was filled with the families of the victims. Many gave impact statements. Some wept, others screamed. One father told Ridgway he hoped he would rot in hell. Perhaps the most haunting moment came when one man, whose daughter had been murdered, simply told Ridgway, "I forgive you." Ridgway, who had been emotionless throughout the proceedings, broke into tears the only time he showed visible emotion. Gary Ridgway was sentenced to 48 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was spared the death penalty due to his plea agreement. He was imprisoned at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla and later transferred to USP Florence, a federal supermax prison in Colorado, due to concerns for his safety and general population. His case remains one of the darkest in American history, not only because of the sheer number of victims, but because of how long he was able to evade capture. He was married, held a steady job, and was seen by CO workers as quiet but reliable. He was, in the eyes of many, invisible, hiding in plain sight. The Green River Killer investigation marked a turning point in criminal forensics. It highlighted the need for improved DNA analysis, better coordination between jurisdictions, and greater protection for marginalized communities. Many of his victims were sex workers, drug users, or runaways, individuals often overlooked or dismissed, which allowed Ridgway to continue killing for years with impunity. To this day, bodies are still being identified using DNA and forensic genealogy. Ridgway, now in his 70s, remains incarcerated, and while the official count is 49 victims, many believe the real number will never be known. He has become the embodiment of the serial killer archetype, methodical, remorseless, and terrifying in his ordinariness.